Hey, welcome back to my channel. Today's video I will be showing you 3 DIYs. They are very easy and budget friendly. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so our first project is this Hactagon Wall Art. This sign I picked up at the dollar store, the Dollar Tree, and I am just removing the welcome, which is metal, from this hectagon sign. And I'm removing that. It is not easy to get up. It gave me quite a challenge to remove it. And after I eventually removed it, I am now sanding down. So I'm just sanding it down to remove all the rough edges. As you can see, a part of it, the top coating, came off. So I gave it 2 coats of white using my white chalk paint, and I allowed it to dry. My original intention was to replace the welcome sign after I painted it white. However, that did not work out as planned, so I scratched that idea. So here you can see I'm just sanding down the sign, and then I eventually painted it black with the intention of putting it back on there. But then I changed my mind and moved to another design. So what I'm doing here, I'm just rubbing the edges of the sign just to give it a weathered look. So I took the sanding block and I just rubbed it a little bit, rub the edges, give it that weathered look. And I am now going to take my jute, just to use the jute. So I have this little technique that I use sometimes to get shiplap lines rather than using a ruler. So I'm just mixing a little diluted brown paint, and then I just dipped my finger inside the paint rather than immersing the jute cord. I just dipped my finger and just rub it on the cord, and then applied it in measured distances. Just eyeball where I needed it and just press it down onto the sign. I then took my chip brush and just applied a little bit across the sign. Now these signs, laser cut signs, I also got from the Dollar Tree, and I have the words here, amazing trust. And what I'm doing, I'm just going to take 2 of them and glue them on. Amazing at the top and trust at the bottom. I thought that these 2 laser cut words just fit perfectly on this sign. So I took some Mod Podge and I just glossed that over to seal them in. I am now going to take my jute and make just a small bow. In making my jute bows, I find it easier to just wrap the jute around my fingers, maybe 4 of my fingers depending on the size, a couple times, and then just take another piece and wrap that around to secure it, and that's my bow. However, as usual, feel free to customize yours as much as you would like. I then took some Greenery leftover boxwood pick and I applied that right beneath the bow. I also had half of a wooden bead and I glued that on as well. So there you have it. Very easy, budget friendly DIY. I absolutely love this one, with the exception of losing a little piece of the print at the beginning. I just love how this one turned out. So for this next DIY, I'll be using this Galvanize planter from the Dollar Tree. Now my original idea was to paint this white but cover the wording or the lettering and then remove that afterwards. Well, let's just say that was a grand idea, which you'll see further on what happened. So I covered the words with some tape, and then I painted the bucket, gave it 2 coats of chalk paint. And after the 2 coats of chalk paint, I took a piece of rope and I wrapped that around the end, or the bottom of the bucket. Now after I did that, I now decided to remove the tape, and of course, yeah, that was not too bad. I removed the tape and I figured, okay, I'll just use some paint and just cover the areas that's in between the words, and that will leave the word black on top of white. That was proving to be a challenge, so I abandoned that idea and just covered the entire thing with white. Decided to wrap the handles with some twine, and of course I started that and changed my mind again, and then I just totally abandoned the idea of wrapping the handles. After it was dried, I took my sanding block and I'm just sanding it down. I wanted to have some of the galvanized portion showing through the white, and that's why I'm sanding it down. I then took a damp paper towel and wipe off the excess chalk before I moved on. Now it's time to add some flowers. So I placed a piece of floral foam in the middle of the bucket, and I'm just adding some white stones. I then took some reindeer moss and I added that to it, and then I am now going to add these succulents that I picked up at the dollar store, and I'm just going to be placing them in there in a way where they're balanced in terms of design and look, and that is done. Now I moved on to building a stand for the planter. It looked too bare to me, so I decided to build a little stand. So I'm taking this round board from Walmart, that's where I got it, and this 5/8 inch dowel. And what I'm doing, I'm just measuring out 3 inches, 3 inches. Then I'm using my miter box to cut that. If you don't have a saw and miter box, you can use any saw. I then wanted the legs to spread a little bit, so I decided to cut at an angle. I could have used the miter box for that, but the shear worked just as well. So I cut all 3 pieces at an angle. I am now going to place a piece of tape onto the round board before I start staining, and that's just to cover the area that I'm going to be gluing the legs onto. I took a ruler and I measured the distance between the spaces before I started staining. I eventually decided to use my American walnut, but that to me was a little too dark, and I changed my mind and ended up using the early American stain. I may go back afterwards and put another coat of the American walnut on there, because I think that will give it an even darker shade. Make sure to stain the legs as well evenly. I stained as well as used a damp paper towel to just wipe off the excess so that the legs are not too dark or not darker than the base itself. Now I only allowed the wood and the stain to dry for probably about 10 minutes. Now you can leave it for longer. I didn't, and now I am just using some white paint, chalk paint, to just dry brush over, just to give it a weathered look or farmhouse chic look, if you want to call it that. I am now going to glue the legs on, and as you can see on the flip side how the two different stain. So I applied some hot glue as well as wood glue to the legs, and I removed the tape, the masking tape, before I glued them on. I left those overnight to dry properly, and then I got back to it the next day. Now afterwards you can add some hot glue just to further secure it, but that's optional. You don't have to do that. Now our little planter bucket was still looking a little bit too plain, so I decided to add one of these heart tags, wooden tags from the Dollar Tree. I could have written something on there, but I just didn't know what to write. I just decided to leave it as is. So I took some hot glue and glued that on, and I took one string of the jute cord that came with this, made a little bow and attached it to the planter, and I am done. So there you have it. Now these two pieces, I started out not loving the idea that I had originally, but at the end I am loving how they turned out. Now for this last DIY, I'm calling this the hourglass planter. I'm taking these two planters that came in a set of 3 from the dollar store or the Dollar Tree, and I'm just using a piece of electrical tape to cover the area that I do not want to paint. The edges of these planters have like a little design on it, and I decided to just leave it as is. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just covering. I am then going to take some chalk paint and I think I gave it 2 coats of chalk paint, both planters. And when they were all dried, I then took some hot glue and glued them together. Looking at it now, I think it would look good with having black around the edges, but then I didn't do that. I may do that afterwards, but for now I'll just leave it with the original design and color. I then took some Waverly brown and just a little bit with my chip brush and dry brush that over to give it a rustic look. This part is also optional. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. I then went in with a piece of rope and just to cover where the bases of the two stands or planters met. I took some Mod Podge and I just applied a little over it before I removed the tape. I then took a little piece of jute and again made a bow and placed that on there just for added decoration. And after I was done with that, it's now time to add my floral. So I took some flowers, these are from the dollar store, and I just added them, removed the stems, made them shorter, removed the stems and just added them in. I realized that I needed to add some weight, so I took some of this white rocks and I added that to the base of the planter just to give it weight and balance. And I was done with this. So there you have it, guys. 3 or 3.5 or 4, if you want to call it that, budget friendly DIYs. Again, let me know in the comments which of these were your favorite and whether you would try any of these. Thank you so much for watching, and again, please like, subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. Thank you again for watching, and I'll catch you in my next one. Bye.